Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I remember actually around the time I was diagnosed with autism, I have some memories from around that time, although I didn't know what it was, but I could tell just based on how I was feeling and acting that I had something, you know.
Mm.
And I remember 2001, I was 3 years old, and I was brought to this play group called Mountaintop in my hometown of Estes Park, Colorado. And I was excited going there, but I only lasted there for 2 weeks. And the only thing I remember from those 2 weeks was being restrained by staff members and then by arms and legs. And then I was moving back and forth to try to get out of their grip, but I ended up smashing my face against one of the cubbies. And the next thing I
Oh,
remember, I tasted something salty, and it was my first bloody nose.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah,
oh,
and that's when I realized that something was within me, but I just didn't know
yeah,
about it until many years later.
yeah. My son, so I have three boys and they're all on the spectrum, but I didn't know. So my middle guy was very obvious because it happened overnight, and we've discussed this prior. But my oldest, there was like little subtle things, and he's very high functioning. And then I got him diagnosed at 8. He's now 11. And when we told him, I told him straight after, as soon as we left the building, where the lady goes, "Yep, this is like what he," and I was like, "Okay." So, and I told him, and he was like, "I knew it." And he was so excited. He goes, "I knew it. I knew it. I was kind of like River, but not." And I knew I had something because it didn't make sense to me, and other things didn't make sense to me. And he was so happy. And he goes, "Now I know what my superpower is." And I was
Mm.
like, "Good for you." And he was so excited to be diagnosed and told he was diagnosed. So I distinctly remember that. And I was like, I wasn't, he goes, "Why did it take you so long?" And I said, "Because it's such a spectrum." I said, "Your brother doesn't speak and you speak very clearly." And I was like, it was very different sides. And I said, "So we didn't know." And I said, "But I'm glad we got to it." But I told him instantly because I knew he knew something was going on because we're taking him to appointments. You know what I mean?
I think
Yeah,
it gives a sense of like self-advocacy too, having that
Right.
diagnosis. It puts a name to all of these aspects in terms of like, emotional recognition or lack thereof, for example. So
Yeah.
things like that you've been struggling with or not or whatever. Now you can kind of put a name to it. I imagine that there's a sense of relief in a way. I
Yeah.
can't speak to it personally, but I could imagine that being kind of, yeah, comforting in a way.
Yeah. But my little guy, he's 7 now, and he's like, "Why do I want to jump in water, but I don't like the feeling of water?" And I was like, "Okay, so that's part of your autism." I said, "You're like hypersensitive on your skin." And he goes, "So it's like my superpower." And I was like, "Yeah, like your superpower." A lot of kids don't feel anything on their legs when they walk into the water, but you feel it a lot. So that's where you're hypersensitive. And he was like, "Oh," so he relates it back. And we talk really openly about different feelings, like quick to anger, quick to sadness, sensory stuff, food stuff. And we talk really openly. And they're really grateful for it because they said a lot of their friends, they're like, "What is
Yeah.
this?" And they don't know how to describe it and other things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
didn't you say that one of your children was diagnosed with autism after he suddenly stopped talking? Is that the one that doesn't talk?
that was River. So he was a fully functional kid, and then Bodhi and him, my eldest and him, got a stomach flu, and they were like best friends, playing together, talking together. And then overnight, I came into his room and he was not talking. He wouldn't look at me, and I was like, "What is going on?" He had like a huge fever the night before, and we took him to the hospital, and they were like, "Oh, he's got autism," and I'm like, "You can't get autism overnight." Like how? And they're like, "What do you mean?" And we went through it, and we went through a bunch of testing, and they said that there's 110 environmental triggers to autism, and fever is one of them. And it just so happens that's what happened. And so there's like a bunch of research on it. If you look up fever and autism, there's like a bunch of research on it. And they, they gave us really like hints and things. It's like something activates when you have a fever, and when you stop your fever, that protein stops, but his protein didn't. And that's what happened. So it was sudden for the boys. It was very traumatic for my eldest, because he's like, my brother just now doesn't talk to me. And he wondered if his friends would just stop talking to him. Or when he was diagnosed, that was one of his questions, like, will I stop talking? So yeah, he was sudden. So that's why it was so different.
Does he talk
so
today?
with a lot of ABA and a lot of speech therapy, he was doing 40 hours of ABA and speech therapy. And then we got him into a school, and his current school as well. And he's now using 3 to 5 word sentences. He's doing amazing. He can do ask for wants and needs, but the back and forth conversation is still not there. But he's awesome. He's come so far from being very angry, because he even told us he started hitting his head because he thought the words were stuck in his head. So one of his first words was sticky stuck in my head. And we were like, oh, your words are stuck. And so I told him the therapists are helping him to get them out. And he just then loved therapy because he knows that they're helping those words come out. So yeah, he's doing amazing now with ABA therapy and having that.
That's great to hear. Good to hear that he's going through therapy. So, Brendan, do you have any thoughts at the moment?
I think that, yeah, it's nothing to hide. Like, yeah, it's definitely nothing to hide, and it just makes you who you are. Yes, and I think early recognition's the best if you can find it. Yeah, and yeah, that. So,
do you have any funny memories of being around autistic people or all that?
with myself, I do probably. Yeah, just the things I used to do when I was really young. I used to have this top, and I used to put my nose on it for no reason. I used to spin around. And I used to find that fascinating for some reason. It was hilarious. Yeah.
That's awesome.
What about you, Skylar?
I've created a box for my clinic where we can write down just like funny things that kids say to us throughout the day, or a new game that a kid came up with that we got a kick out of, or some new strategy for implementing a procedure, or, things like this. And so over the quarter, we just kind of add to it. And then on our admin days, we open it and read them all. And it's just the reason I created it was just to like remind us why we love this job, because it is exhausting. It is emotionally and physically very, very taxing, and it can cause burnout really, really quick. We have a very high turnover rate on staffing just because it's exhausting. It really is. And so having these reminders, like, this is why we do this, like I had a kid last week tell me, I wish you were my sister. And I said, really? Why is that? And he goes, so I could hit you with a Nerf bullet whenever I felt like it. Thanks, kid. So just things like that, like just the funny things kids say. I mean, I love it. I get such a kick out of it. So I have a list in my phone of all of them, and it's just so easy to go back through and go, this is why I do this. This is why I love it.
That's cool.
Yeah. Want to hear my funniest memory of being autistic?
Please tell me. I need to know.
I like the creepiness in that voice right there.
Please tell me.
Okay, here's how it went. During my 5th grade year in 2008 and 9, I remember at the end of the school year, we went camping. The people in my grade, we all went camping at High Peaks Camp in Colorado. I'm originally from Colorado, by the way. And during the camping trip, we did activities that involved working together, stuff like that. And there were obstacle courses and fun games and all that involving working together. At the end of the first day of camp, however, we went dancing on a dance floor for an evening dance party, and we heard the last live performance of Michael Jackson's Beat It, not in person, but on the radio. And then a month later, he would die. God rest his soul. And what ended up happening was at one point, the music got interrupted by some really inappropriate rap music. And I was taught by my family to be polite. And so I didn't hear curse words a lot growing up. But I remember in the rap, I was starting to hear words that I never heard of before, like bastard and a few other words. And I remember thinking to myself, wait, what does bastard mean? And then I went around the gym floor asking other people if they knew what bastard meant. And when nobody listened to me, I went onto the stage, grabbed the microphone, and I was like, can somebody please tell me what bastard means?
That is fantastic.
Yeah, and to make it even funnier, the teachers went to investigate it because that music was obviously not planned, you know? And they figured out that a couple students had switched the recording, the disc, to their rap music. And as I remember, they got thrown out for the rest of the event for it. But I remember, I would say that mine stole the headlines better than they did.
I think so.
And it's a totally innocent mistake to make. Right. You know, as a kid, you don't know what something is, and so you ask.
Yeah, I actually remember as well that one of the students I asked him what it meant, and he was just like a little surprised. And luckily I wasn't punished for my language, but I was told by the teachers afterwards that it was a bad word and to not do it again, you know?
Yep. I teach 5th and 6th grade, so it's pre-pubescent. So I get asked many a question, and I have to keep a straight face and be like, well, I think that's a question for your parents, or let's not say that word out loud. And like, I have to use those
or
things.
To say you'll understand when you get older.
You understand when you get, but I don't want to do that because I don't want them to be like, feel unheard. So I'm like, you know what? You should ask your parents. But I love it. I love when they come to me and ask, because I know it's purely, I don't know this word. I really want to know. And I feel like all my class is really inquisitive and they like knowledge. So it's like, okay, that's something to ask your parents, or maybe let's not say that out loud kind of thing. Or I love it. I love it.
I have another good story if you want to hear it.